Hey photographer, Jessica Whitaker here, and in this video we are going to be reviewing the Sigma 35mm Art 1.4 lens. This lens is praised and it's also roasted over the open flames in Facebook groups for a variety of reasons, and we're going to go into the pros and cons of this cult classic and talk about if it's actually worth the hype and worth the high price tag. I want to thank KEH Camera for sponsoring this video. KEH is one of the world's largest online resellers of camera gear. KEH is a sustainable way to add to your collection or to sell gear that you're not utilizing in a way that's safe and quality inspected. Most of the lenses in my very limited collection are purchased used, whether they're from KEH or friends. Lots of people sell their camera gear on Facebook Marketplace or even on Instagram stories. I've bought a lens from a friend on Twitter. However, if you don't know or trust the person that you're purchasing from, you have no idea the actual condition of the lenses. But with KEH, all of the equipment that comes in is going through a thorough quality inspection. So you're able to still get those Facebook Marketplace price points, but you're actually knowing what you're getting yourself into. If you are interested in checking out KEH for yourself, you can click the link down in the description box below and use the code JESS1 at checkout for 5% off of your purchase, which does add up when you're buying hundreds of dollars worth of camera gear. With that being said, let's get into the review. Before we get into the pros and cons, let's talk about the basic specs of the lens. The aperture range goes from 1.4, that's why you see 35mm 1.4 in the title, 1.4 as open as it will get, and it goes all the way up to f/16. This is a heavy lens. It's about 1.5 pounds almost, and it's also quite long. So this isn't something that you can just pop onto your already bulky DSLR and like put in your purse. You're gonna have to have a tote bag or a camera bag. So let's say you're not a professional photographer, but you're a business owner and you are looking for a versatile option to be able to throw into your bag for the day, use throughout your work day, capture whatever content you need for your social pages. Maybe you're a blogger. This lens isn't something that's compact, though it is versatile, and we'll talk about that in a second. It is still bulky and it's quite heavy. Somebody in the Build a Bloom Facebook group asked if the lens was sturdy, as in do the rotators and or glass rattle when it's shaken, and I thought that was a good question. Yes, I would say so, but I don't think it's necessarily heavy duty. It's not weather sealed also, but the glass doesn't rattle. I think that it's held up pretty well over the past few years that I've had it, since 2016, but it's still a camera lens that you have to be quite delicate with. I'm gonna have the lens linked down below and you can read up all of the specs for yourself, all of the ins and outs. I just wanna focus on more of the practical elements. First, we're gonna talk about the focusing overall, and then we're gonna talk about some of the focusing issues, which is a pretty hot topic. Focusing overall. Manual focus is great, it's pretty smooth, and I find that if you're comfortable manually focusing, it's kind of hard to miss the focus on this just because it isn't too slick at all. It's pretty simple. Autofocus, I never experienced any missed focus. However, with further away shots, it can be hard to nail, but that's when you're just gonna wanna do 3 or 4 shots of the same frame. Focusing speed. A member of the Build and Bloom photography Facebook group asked, is it slow or fast in focusing, specifically in low light? I would say that it is pretty moderate. In low light situations, it's really going to depend. If you have some kind of artificial light source that's able to directly hit your subject, it's faster. But if you are out somewhere where there isn't any artificial light source you can even bring your subject somewhat to, it is going to be a bit slower in focus, but manual focus might be your best option in that case. And I really do think that the manual focus is really good on this camera, but if you're not comfortable with manual focus, you might disagree. I think a big key to manual focus is to be shooting in live mode. So that means the back screen on your camera, you have it open and you can see it as if you were looking through the viewfinder. And on the flip side, when it comes to daylight, in my opinion, this is all my opinion and just from my own experience, I do think it's pretty fast. I've shot lots of weddings with this, very fast moving, where the bride's walking down the aisle kind of thing. I'm pretty confident in the focusing speed, but you also have to be confident in using manual settings on your camera in general. I think it's kind of easy to sometimes shift the blame onto a lens when you as the photographer aren't comfortable yet in working your camera. They go hand in hand. So before you say bye to a lens that you're just not loving, I would really evaluate if you have truly mastered the manual settings on your camera, how your camera works, the ins and outs, because it's not always the lens. And it's not always you either. Sometimes it can be the lighting situation. Even just the styling and the colors that you have in your image can contribute to why you might not like the photographs that you took that day. It's not always the lens. Let's talk about the infamous focusing issues that the Sigma 35mm art lens has. In the Build and Bloom Facebook group and on a variety of Facebook groups, I would see so many posts about, you guys, my Sigma lens, I got it in, it's brand new, and it's missing the focus. Or people would be posting in anticipation, I just ordered my Sigma lens, I got it new, but I'm nervous about the focusing. What do I do? And the advice that I've seen over years and that I would give is just send it back to the manufacturer. It sucks and it feels like a huge waste of time where you're like, okay, so I'm waiting for my package. Now it's not working. Let me package it back up, take it to the post office, have it sent back, go through the process of the exchange. I know it sucks and it shouldn't be happening when you're making such a big investment, but it does, and that's the best answer that I can give you. Have I experienced focusing issues? No, I haven't, and it seems pretty 50-50 from what I've seen over years of being involved in Facebook groups, that this is a pretty case-by-case scenario. The people who are posting about how their lens is missing focus are also getting comments from people saying that theirs has never had focusing issues. The best advice that I can give is to send it back to wherever you purchased it from. However, if you're buying somewhere like KEH Camera, so you're buying it used, it's already going through a quality inspection. So even though it's used, and you might think used equals more likely that the focus is off, that's not always the case. You're probably more likely to get a lens that you're not gonna have to exchange because it's gone through the quality inspection. Let's talk about this lens in correlation to using it with video. Now, I am not a videographer, but this is the lens that I've been using for years on my YouTube videos, and it's a popular lens amongst other videographers within the Build and Bloom Facebook community, at least. I can really only brush on a few things when it comes to this lens in video, but if anybody out there has anything else that they would like to add in, you can bring that conversation into the comments below because anything can help. One of the members in the Build and Bloom group said, what makes it good for video as opposed to other lenses? I prefer the 35mm lens over shooting with a 50mm. Right now, the video you're watching is being shot on a 50mm lens. My camera alone is just pushed back pretty far onto the wall, whereas with the 35, I just have so much more wiggle room to move around. I can shoot this in a tight space. And the same thing goes for photographs too, which we'll talk about the focal length in depth a little bit more, but I just think it's such a great option where you're also not going to get too much stretching or distortion on the lens like you might with a 24mm. When you look through a 35mm, it looks a lot more familiar. It looks a lot more realistic than something as wide as a 24mm, and I think that's why people like it so much for videography, and just that it's a very versatile option. Now, I have a video where I've compared the 35mm against a 24mm, and you'll be able to see exactly what I mean in that video, so I'll have that linked down below. Another question was, would you recommend shooting a wedding video with it? I don't see why not, but I don't think I would shoot the entire wedding with the 35mm lens, as I wouldn't shoot an entire wedding with just a 35mm lens as a photographer. You're going to need different lenses for different shots, even if it means you're simply renting. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that you have to have 10 lenses in your collection. Seriously, I don't own that many lenses in my collection. I have a video if you want to see it and why some lenses like I regret buying, but anyways, it's the same case of with a wedding, you are going to have a 50mm for portraits. You might have an 85, maybe. You're not just going to shoot on one lens the entire day. Another member of the Build and Bloom Facebook group asked if this lens has focus breathing. For those who don't know, focus breathing is essentially where the frame shifts slightly as you adjust the focus on the lens. So you might see it go in and out ever so slightly on the very edges of the frame, right? For me personally, on this lens, I have not noticed anything when it comes to focus breathing that is too intense. If it is there, it's barely there. Okay, we're gonna move on into some general questions that I got from members. Number one was about distortion. Lens distortion is essentially when all four corners of your lens kind of have bowed out ever so slightly, you're able to fix it later in post-processing, so in your editing program. And what you'll notice is once you check fixed lens distortion, the image kind of pops and it flattens out. This lens has a lot of distortion in my opinion. It's something that you need to be aware of and that you'll want to fix later in post-processing. The fact that it is considered a wide angle lens, and when you pair that with distortion, it's not always the best for portrait photography, which might come as like a shock to some people because we see a lot of portrait photographers raving about this lens, and for good reason of its versatility. However, it's still not something like a 50mm or an 85mm that is a standard portrait lens. With all that being said, when you take a close-up image of somebody's face, their face is just going to pull pretty wide and it's not the most flattering. You can make it work though, and how you make it work is by being aware of the fact that there is lens distortion. So you want to have your subject pretty in the center of the frame and giving enough room to have those corners pull out where it's not going to affect their facial features. Another member wanted to know about chromatic aberration, and I don't think that this lens has very bad chromatic aberration at all. And if you don't know what that is, all of these terms, please look them up because I'm explaining them in a very simple way. I do teach to beginners and I want to make photography as accessible as possible. Chromatic aberration is basically where there's magenta, so purple, lining around certain objects in your photograph that are up against something white or very light in color and bright. So common example I could pull is if you have photographed a tree, maybe a tree with no leaves on it, and it's against a white overcast sky, you might see an outline of purple around the branches. That's chromatic aberration. But some lenses do it worse than others, and this lens, I don't experience it very bad. Yes, it's there, but it's easily able to be fixed if it bothers you. Now's the moment so many of you have been waiting for. We are going to be talking about the price point of this lens. How much does it cost, and is it actually worth the price tag? I purchased this lens in 2016 online through B&H Photo, and I bought it new for $900. I went back through my emails to pull up the receipt to make sure that the price point was correct, and yep, it was $899 before tax. Now in 2020 on B&H, they have it listed for $700. So there is about a $200 price difference before you deal with sales tax and shipping. $700 seems to be the average price point if you were to purchase this lens new across most retailers. If you were to buy this camera lens used on KEH, I looked up one of the listings and the Nikon mount is about $580. Now let's go into a little bit more about the pricing, and somebody actually on the Facebook group asked, why Sigma over Canon or Sigma over Nikon? I shoot primarily with Canon, but I also love Nikon. I'm not brand loyal to really any camera company. I have shot with the Sigma 35 Art on both a Canon mount and a Nikon mount. Why Sigma over Canon or Sigma over Nikon is because of the price point. The average cost for a Canon 35mm 1.4 lens is over $1,200 new. And with Nikon, you're looking at $1,200 to $1,400 new. And even if you were to buy the Sigma Art lens new at $700, Nikon 1400 is double the price. That's so expensive. And I get why lenses are expensive, but I think a big reason why people choose the Sigma 35 over buying a Nikon or a Canon prime lens is because of the price point. You're getting something great for a lower cost. However, $700 is still so expensive. That's why I'm like, whenever you can buy used in your business, go for it. Even when it comes to like Amazon listings for buying books or lighting equipment, when you can opt for used, it's usually like new pieces. It's not like this has been around the block, dunked in the pond, shot 40 weddings. You're usually just getting something that someone wanted to pass on because they're not getting enough use out of it themselves, so why not make some extra cash? You're not getting this dingy old lens from 1922. Let's end the video talking about what I use it for, and I'm also going to send you below to some sample photos. What do I use this lens for? I use it when I'm traveling. I use it for branding shots of people and they want to incorporate their office environment in the background. I use it for some portraits. I use it for group photos, family photos. You could probably use some landscape in a sense, maybe if you're more on holiday and like taking a photo of the beach, but I don't think that this is going to be the best lens for a landscape photographer at all. Like at all, it's not wide enough for that. Some people were asking in the group if you could photograph food or product with this lens. And I do think that you can, but what I primarily use this lens for is for traveling. If I just want to bring one lens with me for my whole holiday, I love that you can be in a tight space and still be able to get quite a bit of the environment in the background into the shot. Whereas with a 50mm, you're pretty limited, especially if you're in a small coffee shop or an Airbnb, or even here in my home office, it's pretty tight. When you have that extra bit of length, you are able to completely shift the tone of a portrait. But the distortion, it goes back to the fact that the images are going to be a bit warped. So if you are going to also be using this for portraits, you need to practice and to understand how you need to operate the lens differently when it comes to shooting close-up photographs to keep it still nice and flattering. For those interested, I did a video where I compare the 35mm against a 50mm and an 85mm side-by-side comparisons. It's actually one of my most popular videos on my channel. KEH and I worked together on it actually, and I think that video is going to be the best place for you to see exactly why I sometimes prefer the 35, what I exactly use it for in actual on a photo shoot, how it compares to a 50mm, how it compares to an 85. To sum up my answer, for what I use this lens for, mostly travel, which does include portraits, but it's not something now that I use primarily on portrait photo shoots. However, there were times in 2017 up to 2019 until I upgraded to getting a 50mm 1.2 lens that I was just using this on my portrait shoots, and it was fine. But again, with the distortion, it is something that you have to work around because it does really warp and distort the face if you're not careful. With all of that being said, I hope that this video has given you a good resource to be able to point you in the right direction if this lens is a good fit for you and your business, or maybe if you're ready to part with it and make some extra cash by selling it on something like KEH. Again, KEH is linked down below and you'll get 5% off of your purchase with code JESS1 at checkout. And if you want to be the first to know when new tutorials for you and your photography business come out on my YouTube channel, be sure to hit subscribe and to hit the bell notification to be notified when those videos come out, because I'm here every single week teaching for you for free. And if you want to continue the conversation, I have my Instagram account where I post daily tools and tips and tricks. I also have launched a business photography podcast. My YouTube is more about reviews and tutorials, but my photography podcast, Build and Bloom, is where I'm able to discuss more in depth about pricing, about distribution, about customer service, about experience. I have amazing guests on the show, from a financial advisor to a woman who opened up a photography studio in LA and like teaches you practical steps on how to actually run one. We have a musician coming on talking about branding. We have so many amazing guests on the Build and Bloom photography podcast that aren't photographers, that still circle back to the art of visual media and creating a well-rounded business for you. It's an amazing resource. I'm so stoked about the podcast. And of course, there's also my photography Facebook group, Build and Bloom, with over 65,000 kind, encouraging photographers. With that being said, don't forget to hit subscribe on your way out. Check out KEH Camera, linked down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.